guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be working on our Razor ground force drifter, and we have something very special in store for you guys that I'm really excited to announce and show you guys. I believe this upgrade has a lot of potential to benefit us in our goal of making the best drift go-kart platform out of this Razor ground force drifter go-kart. As you guys know, we've done the axle flip on it in a previous video, which changed the way it drove completely. It performed a lot better than I expected it to, and we're going to continue to build on top of that and make this thing even better for anyone who wants to find a cheap and easy to take anywhere go-kart platform. This suspension upgrade will be something that will make the kart feel better when driving it in general, and we're going to hope that it performs as good as we're expecting to when we're drifting. So here is the first look at the suspension. As you can see, I have it done on one side, and I still have to modify it to work on this side as well. Right now I'm finding a solution for the tie rods so that they can move, because as of right now it has a fixed mounting position in the middle here. So if our spindle moves up and down like so, then our tie rod won't be able to, and it'll act as a sway bar because it can't go up and down from the middle point. This is our work in progress mounting bracket that we are doing from one hole to two holes to go to two different tie rod lengths. So that's a work in progress, but I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to show you the steps that I took to get from the stock spindle to the beefier upgraded spindle. I want to note that you can do this spindle upgrade without incorporating the suspension and springs like we have here. The only difference is that instead of the springs, you would fill it with spacers like this one. The reason I have a spacer right here is to add preload on the springs, since they aren't a little bit longer than this distance. This allows for constant spring tension with this spacer. So what's nice when you have the spacers is that you can adjust the ride height for where you want the go-kart. Since if you're someone who did the axle flip in the back, you'll know that the go-kart sits extremely low now and the front sits extremely high. So to counter that, put the spacers where you want according to where you want to set the ride height of the front of the go-kart. Ideally, when drifting, you want the front to be a little bit higher because it allows the rear to grip up more, and you don't want to put too much tension on this front spindle. But since it's beefier, it doesn't matter too much. I personally don't like to be driving sloped forward when I'm drifting. I like to be more like have the rear settled and lower compared to the front. This suspension works for me because it's constantly lowering and settling itself where it wants to be when I'm driving. So at the moment, I only have two springs in there, which I might eventually go to one spring, because like 90% of the weight on this go-kart is in the rear. And so depending on how it functions when we go and test drive it, two springs might be too stiff. So I might resort to one spring, but we're gonna test the supposedly stiffer setting first. Moving on to the stock spindle. This stock spindle is extremely weak. It's a very thin shaft. This isn't a good example because these are the adapters that I put on to allow bigger front wheels. Just know that if you have one of these, these are very thin. They feel like they're gonna break. They look very flimsy, and so the spindle upgrade is much more worth it. Even though it costs a little bit, it's a peace of mind knowing that the go-kart is going to be a lot better off. It's gonna feel better. It's going to adapt to your bigger wheels a lot better. And you have a lot more options in terms of ride height and how the go-kart will feel when you're drifting it or even driving it. So we're going to be removing this one and replicating what we did on the other side, and I'm going to be showing you the steps. I want to note that all the little pieces and parts that I'm going to be using on this build I have linked below, or I'll put them in this top right corner for you guys. So first step, so these are going to slip right into our chassis just like that. Super easy. It's going to go on the top and bottom. That's one thing that's hard, is to make sure this is held in and to get the springs in and bolt in at the same time. So just know you're going to be doing a little bit of a juggling act, trying to make sure this bottom washer sits under there. Because to my knowledge they don't make a 6 to 12 millimeter sleeve like this, that we're going to be using this little sleeve that is a 6 to 8 millimeter, and this is going to go right into here. Of course you got to hammer it in, but that's fine. So, and I know it's a little bit longer than the sleeve, but that isn't a concern, and I'll show you guys why later. These sleeves have this rubber insulation on the inside. You can't really see it, but basically you want to take a 1/4 inch drill bit and drill out all the rubber that is in here. So first drill out the sleeve with a 1/4 inch, then hammer the sleeve into the top hat. You're going to do that for 4 of these top hats. For example, here's our spindle. You're going to 1 here, 2 here, 3, and 4. And that's going to keep the bolt from shifting back and forth and being perfectly aligned with the spindle, and keeping the spindle perfectly aligned with our go-kart spindle mounting location. And then we're going to align the springs and then feed the bolt through, put a few washers, and call it a day. So I want to note something before I fully assemble everything. Here, as you can see, I have one of the top hats with the sleeve inside on the actual bolt. So when you put it through, you can see there's ever so slightly some movement in the spindle, and that's because the spindle is like a millimeter too big compared to our top hats here, which isn't a big issue. I found that when I tightened the spindle on the other side, that it didn't have any play. Now again, I haven't really tested it yet, but if it becomes too much play, that I will be putting some like electrical tape or some sort of cushion in there to create just enough barrier to keep this a little bit more snug and from like chattering. This bolt being tight will not hinder the steering ability like it did with the stock one, because the stock spindle clamped onto this. Now when you tighten this, it's clamping onto the spindle itself, and this is so strong it's not going to affect how it's going to rotate when you're driving. But make sure this bolt is tight so that this doesn't move around and have all the play that you can kind of see there. Not the end of the world, but with the instructions that I'm giving you, this is the only play that will be in this whole spindle assembly. So if there's any sort of chattering and stuff, it's probably going to be that. When we're assembling this, I actually was looking at the other side, and I have 5 of these top hats. I assume that your go-kart is mostly complete when you have it or, you know, decide to buy one. So when you buy one of these stock, they come with stainless steel top hats. Now you're gonna actually wanna use these because these brass ones are a little bit softer than the stainless steel. I actually use these stainless steel ones. I use it under here and on the, I guess the bottom mounting bracket, but like the top side. And the reason for that is because in between this point and this point where the bottom of the spindle is, that's where you're going to get the most tension, like the load from the road. Like it's going to take all the beating here and here. So the reason I use these in that location is because it's stronger than the brass ones. The brass ones I use just to hold the bolt and everything in place tightly and snug, and these are going to be taking the beating while everything just does its job. So when you assemble this together, the brass fitting at the very bottom with the sleeve and the bolt, then you want to do the stainless steel with the sleeve at the bottom, and then you do your springs. Now I also want to note that when you do the one at the bottom, that the sleeves, these inner sleeves, will contact each other, and because this distance is shorter than the length of those sleeves, so it'll actually stick out just a hair on the inside here. But that's fine because it actually allows the spring to sit around it and create a better holding mechanism on it so it doesn't move. And then after that, you want to use the little spacer that I have here. And then this will go, okay, yeah, you're going to want to drill this out, I forgot. So this is actually a 6mm internal, and you're going to use your 1/4 inch drill bit to drill that out. Now the reason for going 1/4 inch when everything else is metric is because 1/4 inch bolt is going to be which is the size of this bolt. And the reason you want all this surface instead of threads is so that the spring doesn't catch. So note that, that's very important. But the reason for the 1/4 inch bolt instead of a 6mm bolt is because they're easier to find and a little bit cheaper and not quite the specialty bolt. There's more options available, and 1/4 inch is basically the same thing as 6mm, but just to get the preciseness, it doesn't take very much to drill out the 6mm sleeves to 1/4 inch. It's not like you need a lot of fancy machinery. You just need some grips and a drill bit, and you should be good to go. So there's really not much to it. It takes patience, but you know, all of this is a developing product. So then we're gonna go stainless steel again. So now it slips over just perfectly. Keep drilling it out until it slides over nicely, because this is supposed to be, you know, the pivoting point where the bolt just goes up and down and creating that suspension point. So if it doesn't slide through, bore out a little bit, try it, bore out a little bit, try it, and try to get it to that sweet spot. Now that we have all the replicating parts to the other side, we're going to lower this bolt, pinch down the spring, this is the difficult part, but it seems to be okay. It's in. That is your suspension. But you need to put this one on too. And that one is not drilled out all the way. And there you go. Okay, so now you have your suspension. This little thing, all this took me several weeks, several months to figure out. And now you have it in a 10-minute video. Little amounts of play means you just have to tighten this even more. Now for the wheels, how do we put on the wheels, right? This is the wheel I got from BMI Karting, link in the description, 8x3x4. So it's okay, not my favorite wheel to go with. So here's the thing, it's very long, right? And you're like, oh shoot, there's not much thread left. I know. So you take the stock bearings that come in it, you take them out, and then you put the bearings that I have linked in the description for you guys. A bigger one that slips onto here and a smaller one that slips onto the threads because it's so long. And then you'll use a washer and a cotter pin, and that will hold it. Now you can get a nut, but I haven't found a nut at like easily to get and cheap that's at a hardware store that I like yet. And it'll work. It'll be a little chattery, a little loud, but I'm probably going to run that only to test it and eventually get the right bolt, and I'll include that in the parts list for you guys. This is part one of the suspension. In the next video, we're going to figure out how to make the tie rod system work, because you can't use the original tie rods with this system. I also want to mention that this spindle has a lot of camber built into it, which doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, because we don't want the front to limit our drifting and allow us to spin out. So the built-in camber to the spindle is actually exactly what we're looking for. It looks cool, and we're hoping that it'll act properly to what we're expecting it to. Also, in future videos, we're going to experiment with different tires. These happen to be the option that I liked the most at the moment. Stay tuned, because we're going to be testing this very soon. So like I said, that's going to be it for today's video, and we're going to be installing the tie rods in the next video. The reason I am taking this process slow is because I want to make sure that there's enough detail and explanation in these videos, since they are complicated and no one's done it before. And I want to make sure that if you're watching this video and this is something you want to do, that you have the right tools and steps to, you know, accomplishing this if this is something you're looking for. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll be answering every single comment. And also, if you aren't following me on other platforms, I'm very active on those as well. But thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next one. We're going to continue this amazing build, and I can't wait to see how well it drifts when we're done. Peace.